in 3, 2, 1. Hello, Internet. Sorry you missed the first 6 minutes of the show. We were talking about you behind your back. You can check out the podcast to hear all about it. Okay, Anthony, on to the show. We start today with an article that Bill Barnwell wrote for ESPN.com. Of course, one of their senior writers, one of the smartest guys writing about football in the entire business. And he did an article that described the Myles Garrett sweepstakes. And ultimately, at the end of this very long article, he has 3 teams that he thinks should be the biggest contenders for Myles Garrett. And amongst those 3 teams, guess which team he says should be the number 1 landing spot for Myles Garrett?
The Washington Commanders.
Indeed.
Yes, sir.
Indeed. He says
we are the Commanders.
Should pursue Myles Garrett. The deal that he offers up, and I think what's cool about Barnwell's article, and this is in classic Bill Barnwell in-depth fashion, where he's got all of the angles, because it's not like a Commander should go get Myles Garrett article. It's here is a complete guide to the Myles Garrett sweepstakes article. So he's got some historical precedent in terms of other stars that have been traded around the same time in their careers and what the trade returns were. And he goes in depth on some of the caveats, like Darrelle Revis was a much cheaper trade, even though he was at the best corner in football at the time, defensive player of the year type of guy. But he was also coming off a torn ACL when he got traded back in the day from, I believe it was New York, the Jets to New England. Randy Moss was around the same age when the Oakland trade, but whoopsie daisies, the Raiders thought that Randy Moss was done, and then he goes to the Patriots and has the best season of his career. So, like, there are some caveats on some of these, but you go back in time, and there's 3-team deals and all that. He then talks about some of the teams that could potentially get along or be a part in 3-team trades and why they could be appealing. But he ultimately gets to the soup and the nuts of it at the end of it and says that the Washington Commanders are his favorite team to he's got like a maybe group, the teams that put Garrett puts over the top, and those are the Bills, the Lions, the Chargers, and the Eagles. And then he just says, yes, the sweet spot. These are the other teams that should be interested in a Garrett deal and have one key advantage over the other organizations I mentioned above: a cheap quarterback. It's easier for teams on rookie deals that are hoping to compete to go after him, given that they're paying their signal callers about $40 to $50 million less than the going rate for veteran passers. That's a lot of salary to spread elsewhere around the roster. So, the 3 teams are the Chicago Bears, the Indianapolis Colts, and the Washington Commanders. And he starts the Commanders right up with, I've saved the best candidate for last. The Commanders are the most obvious and consequential landing spot for Garrett. They have the championship potential, the financial flexibility, and the clear and obvious need for pass rushing help. And I would just like to, before we go any further with this discussion, Anthony, say that it is February 13th, 2025. And I would like you to think back to your mental state on February 13th, 2024, when it comes to the Washington Commanders. And imagine that I say the following sentence a year later, and that nobody would bat an eye at it. They have the championship potential, the financial flexibility, and the clear and obvious need for pass rushing help. You'd be like, yeah, they have financial flexibility and clear and obvious need for pass rushing. Wait, did you say championship potential?
Yeah.
We are 1 year into this. This time last year, Jaden Daniels was 2.5 months from becoming a Commander. And this is where we are. Speaking of Daniels, Barnwell writes, all of this starts with Daniels. The rookie sensation is still on a bargain deal for 3 more years before the Commanders would even have to consider a 5th-year option. That means 2027 is the year that we're concerned about in terms of, oh, God, we got to pay the quarterback a lot of money. They have $80 million in cap space in 2025. And again, that $80 million is worth caveating on 2 fronts. One, it's not as much as it sounds like because they have so many players they need to sign. It's also more than it sounds like because John Allen can get cut, create an extra $16 million to cap space at $0 in dead money, and that feels very, very likely that could happen. you also have to think about how they were able to get most out of guys like Dante Fowler, who was on a $3.3 million deal last year. Dorrance Armstrong, he's obviously in-house. And then you've got Allen Payne and Newton already on the inside. They need that chess piece. They need that movable piece on the outside. And Barnwell talks about how that has always been the key to getting the absolute best out of a Dan Quinn defense, is whether it's a Bobby Wagner in Seattle first time around, like young Bobby Wagner, whether it's Micah, guys like Earl Thomas, like having these movable chess pieces is how you get the most out of a Dan Quinn, or in this case, a Dan Quinn inspired and assisting Joe Witt defense. And so I think reading that article was interesting because The Athletic put out that thing that we talked about, a week ago or whatever it was, where it's like 2 picks and a player, or two picks and 2 players even. And Barnwell seems to think it might just be 1 player and 1 pick, that the starting point is going to be a first rounder. And I think if you're Washington, that's going to be harder to sell because your first rounder is 29. So you might have to be, giving up, what was I going to say? You might have to give up like 2 firsts, where another team might only give up 1, because if you're, for instance, fighting with Chicago and Indy, Chicago's got a top 10 pick. So how do you make your deal sweeter? And I think the ability to potentially get a third team involved, or the potential to include a larger package because your pick just is not as valuable, might be, that ultimately I think is going to be the decision that Adam Peters has to make if the Browns open up this trade sweepstakes.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at it from a Commander standpoint, though, and what, Adam Peters was able to do and what he's done, in the past in terms of building through the draft, is also, that balance of whether or not we can find, not to say we're going to find a Myles Garrett, but we know if we do end up, pursuing Myles Garrett, the risk of giving up 2 firsts or, 3 firsts or whatever the case may be. I think we were talking earlier, and I wouldn't mind giving up 1 first, maybe even 2. But I think when you start to, talk about more picks and, multiple rounds and things of that nature, I think that's where I get a little scared, just because.
For sure. You have to replace those guys.
Yeah.
Because Myles, for as great as he is, can only play one position. He can't play, or one position at a time. He can't play, be your left tackle and your defensive end and your defensive tackle. But none of the things that you give up are going to turn into Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
None of the individual pieces. All of them are so much more replaceable than Myles Garrett. It's ridiculous. And if you're Cleveland, that's why they're currently like, we're not trading him, right?
Yeah.
They're like, if we give up Myles Garrett, we've lost the trade because we've given up Myles Garrett. Now, for them, they're also not winning anything anytime soon. So for them to give up Myles Garrett now, get maximal return, and push the target down the road is actually probably the smart play. But for a team like Washington that some fans seem to have already forgotten, that are so hesitant, we can't mortgage the future. Like, future's here, pal. Like, they made the NFC Championship game.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say you should go crazy, not to say you should do short-term everything, but you're not trying to kick the can down the road. You're like, there's the can. We found it. Let's see what we can do right now. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We take some calls on that next before Dan Pizzuta joins us coming up at 4:30, talking free agents, as he's just dropped his NFL free agency list top 100. It's Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. I thought people went back to work today, Anthony.
I thought so. I thought they did too.
And yeah, we got no phone calls.
Do you think they're all Myles Garretted out?
I do not think that the Washington Commanders fan base is done with the Myles Garrett discussion.
Okay.
Yet. I do want to real quick though. I was just doing a little bit of homework on something, and yesterday around this time, Russell and I had the conversation about Zach Ertz, and yes, like we were talking about how much you pay him, whatever, and I did a little bit more homework on this, and I don't know that they're going to be able to get Zach Ertz at the number that we talked about yesterday.
Why not?
Because Zach was ridiculously good last year. And, like, I was thinking about it earlier today, and I was like, let me look up some of this stuff. And so Zach was, I'd say probably last year, like, one of the 7 best tight ends in football, probably. You had guy like Kelsey. I know he kind of bonked out in the playoffs, but like he pushed 1,000 yards. Kittle had a ridiculous year. Bowers had a ridiculous year. Andrews had a really good year statistically. Didn't score a ton of touchdowns, but like still had a big year. But I think even some of the criticism that Zach got of like, oh, he's just people think he like caught every pass for 3 yards. Like Zach was, where is it in these notes? He was 4th in touchdowns, 8th in 20-plus yard catches, 9th in first down catches, and 11th in yards amongst tight ends in 2024. So if you think about, he was 8th in 20-plus yard catches. He was 9th in first downs. Like, this is a guy that moved the chains, and obviously we know what he meant to Jaden. We know what he meant on the field to Jaden, to be a security blanket. We talked about yesterday how he's a guy that moves the chains on 4th down, specifically, like so many of those catches are on 4th down that he actually led the NFL in 4th down catches on the season. And then you compare it to some of the other tight ends in the league, and this is where I had to like go back and look, and this is my fault for not looking this up yesterday. First of all, Zach was making $3 million last year, so the idea that you're just going to bring him back on that when, he's coming off Detroit's practice squad last year versus being a top 10 tight end in football probably this past year, like, okay, maybe that $6 million number, you double it. Like, it wasn't a crazy thought. But, in 2020, for instance, Jimmy Graham had pretty similar numbers at a similar age, and he got an $8 million deal. Similar number that year for Greg Olsen, got $7 million. And that's a different cap environment and a different, stress on tight ends now. So there's a really good chance that Zach is going to be pushing closer to $9-10 million this year based off of where the other veteran tight ends and where the tight end market is now versus the, hey, let's just double his salary and bring him back at $6 million. Or compare it to like the Olsen or Graham deals 5 years ago, $7 million, $8 million. Like his market value is probably closer to 9 or 10, which is a big chunk of the Commanders' cap for considering how many holes they have to fill. That said, I would probably still I want to know how much of that I could get in incentives.
That's what I was thinking.
To repeat, but also Zach has a say here. And also, like, my other question is, and this is what I don't know, is what's his market going to be? And I mean that both in terms of what other teams are interested. And I would imagine that, like, if I've got a young quarterback, like if I'm a team like Carolina, do I want to go get Zach Ertz for Bryce Young? Hell yeah, I want to. So, like, there will be teams that are very interested in him. But also, how many teams does Zach want to play for? Like, and then what does that cost? And this is the tough conversation between, like, Zach and Adam and Zach's reps is, like, hey, man, we want you here. We know you want to be here. Part of the reason you want to be here is because we want to win a championship. Like, what's that mean to you in terms of, you've made a ton of money in your career. His career earnings, I was just on his Spotrac page. His career earnings are $74.8 million. I know that's before taxes, but like at that point, if I can look at Zach Ertz and be like, hey man, if you sign for $6 million, we can go get this other $4 million player. Do you need $10 million? Like, unfortunately, like that's the way the league works. And so Zach might be like, sorry, you're gonna have to figure that part out. Better draft well, sucker. You want me at $10 million or not? And that'd be totally within Zach, based on how he played. Like that's totally within the realm of possibility and totally within fairness, I think, for a guy like Ertz, again, for what he brought on and off the field. And you got way more than he was worth last year. Like if I had told you that it's a 2-year, $13 million deal, and you kind of think of it that way, that's fair market value for Zach. That's like under actually market value for Zach Ertz for what he gave you last year. And then assuming that he has even 80% of the season that he would this year. So, like, that's the thing as we start to get closer to free agency and we start to get closer to all of these deals and, like, the math starts to add up. Like, how do you make all these numbers add up is going to be a very interesting question because then, like, I think the same thing you ask about Bobby. Like, right, I would love to get Bobby back on a 1-year, $6.5 million deal. Is Bobby willing to do that? Or is Bobby going to look at, say, hey, I was second team All-Pro. You got to pay me $10, $12 million because that's the going rate. Actually, I don't even know what the going rate for a veteran linebacker is right now. I got to look that up. But, like, that's I think, one of the – when we talk about bringing players back, like, these are the questions that Adam Peters and company are having right now out in Ashburn.
Yeah, but I feel like when you see the news on, Kelsey deciding whether or not he wants to return and how he looked in the playoffs, and I think you just got to understand, Father Time's going to hit. Not to say, Zach Ertz can't duplicate what he did this season, but you also got to understand, he also may be affected by, getting older. And
for sure, but like, are you willing to look Zach Ertz in the face and be like, hey, man, you just had one of the best seasons you certainly had the best season you've had in a while. We need you. So we're not going to pay you because we need you. Like that math doesn't math.
I mean, I think the incentive-laden route is the best way to go just because of that uncertainty of whether or not he's going to be as durable as he was last year. Like, that was also a huge surprise to everybody. He played 17 games, correct?
Right. Totally. And we don't know whether that's going to be what he gets again, or is that going to be was that an aberration? Or because if I'm Zach, I'm like, yeah, part of the reason I played 17 games is because I went into last offseason healthy. And I'm going into this offseason healthy again. Like, I feel good about being able to play. Okay, fine. I can't guarantee you 17, but like 15 games. Like, if I get 15 games of what I got from Zach Ertz last year, like, I'd pay that guy $10 million.
Yeah.
So this is the conundrum that Adam Peters is having. This is a fun conversation to carry over with Dan Pizzuta. We'll do that next on the Hoffman Show, as Dan's got his top 100 of 2025 in terms of NFL free agents. So we'll talk to Dan about all this next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We're streaming live on YouTube too at the team 980. 4:30 on a Thursday, all football season. Meant we got to talk to our guy Dan Pizzuta from the 33rd team, and well, the offseason, Dan put out his top 100 free agent list, and so we're like, let's just keep this appointment because we definitely need to talk to you about that. So with that, we welcome back to the show our good friend Dan Pizzuta from the 33rd team. Dan, how we doing?
Doing well. The off season, but it is absolutely not because nothing stops. So
No,
we're doing well.
Especially like this year was extra weird, I feel like, for me / us in the DC market because we are used to having a little bit of time to decompress. There was no decompression time. Like you lost, you're sad about it. The Super Bowl happened, and now we're 2 weeks from the Combine. And that is, look, they need to either win the Super Bowl or just, I need more time. We can't be the NFC Championship game. I've decided might be the worst time to lose, Dan, for me personally, which is clearly what matters here.
Yeah, I feel that, and definitely getting off the Super Bowl and going, you know what, I'm finally going to have some time to sleep, and then realizing that the Combine is in 2 weeks, and that is not going to happen at all. So we're like about a month away from actually, getting some normal resting time during the week.
Yeah. Then free agency is going to be chaotic, and that returns us to your top 100 list. Before we get there, we were just talking about Zach Ertz, who I'm sure is on your list somewhere in the tight end class. And we had a conversation on the show yesterday where I definitely undervalued Ertz in terms of the money. I didn't realize just how much the tight end market had jumped the last couple of years, where Ertz, if you look at the current market, I was like, I don't know, he made $3 million last year, but he's coming off a year where he basically didn't play. And it was like, I don't know, $7 million somewhere in there. And you go look at the market and it's like, no, this dude's probably a $9 or $10 million player. What do you make of the current tight end market? The fact that position is getting paid like it should, because tight ends are such weapons in the NFL, especially when deployed properly, and how Zach fits into that market specifically this year and specifically for Washington.
Yeah, so I actually wrote about the tight end market leading up to the Super Bowl last year, and I am still of the opinion that the tight end market, while it's getting higher and these guys are getting paid more, it's still a very undervalued position, especially when you are looking at the guys who can catch the ball, at a high rate. You still look at like Travis Kelce right now, what his like average annual deal is, like getting paid $17 million. That's a low end wide receiver too right now. And when you are looking at, the peaks of these types of guys, they are outperforming, what that is going to be on the cap and how much you would have to pay for a wide receiver to have that same type of receiving ability. So I think there is still an undervalued aspect of even paying top of the market tight ends. So Ertz is definitely going to be interesting because, one, this is not a great tight end class in free agency, but it is, at least from, what I've seen, I haven't completely, gotten into the draft class yet, but it does appear to be a very solid class of tight ends coming into the league. So considering that there is not a lot of tight ends in this free agency class, I think I have Zach Ertz as the number 2 tight end behind Juwan Johnson, just because Johnson is a little younger, but they're still pretty far down where that top 100 is. So I think Ertz, if you do believe, especially for a team like Washington, do believe he's going to have that type of value, especially in the middle of the field, even if you're paying him 9-10, which is around the top of the tight end market, that's still way below what you would be paying a wide receiver to have that same type of impact in the passing game.
Dan Pizzuta, 33rd team with us here on the Hoffman Show. So interestingly enough, you've got Zach on your list at 63 overall as the second best tight end, and 2 spots later you have Dyami Brown. And just for reference here, what do you think that Dyami? I don't know how much you've done, so I'm putting you in a bad spot here. I apologize, and we can find another way to ask some similar question. But like, what is Dyami Brown worth on the open market in terms of dollars? And then we can compare that to the, let's say, $10 million that it might cost to keep Zach Ertz.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what Dyami is probably going to come in at, I have. Not sure exactly, but when you look at, Alan Lazard, like 2 years ago was getting $11 million per year, right? Darnell Mooney just got 13 last offseason. So you're probably putting Brown maybe around there. You're still putting that in a, maybe like 9 to 13 range for a receiver of his caliber, especially someone who, if he gets a little more playing time, has the ability to stretch the field on the outside. That is something that so many teams really need to be looking for. And I think that is going to be a value to a lot of teams on the open market. So you're probably looking at those guys, especially since Brown is a bit younger, going to be in around the same value in terms of the average, cap hit or at least the average salary. So you are probably paying about the same. Ertz is going to be a lot older, but when you have a team like, Washington, you are focusing a little more on, needing some of that production in the middle of the field. So that's where, you kind of have Ertz coming in as a potential value there when you are kind of potentially paying the same amount for those two players.
Yeah, for sure. And not to mention what Zach brought off the field, the comfort that he has with Jaden. And I think they'd love to bring Diami back, but if at $13 million a year, like that's you got to play him a lot at that. And I don't know that that's the role that he actually is best in. Okay. What, as you look at the contour of this free agency class, like what are the positions that are really strong to you? And then what positions is there going to be a dogfight? Cause there's just not a lot of guys that are available.
Yeah, where the strongest pieces right now, if you are looking to, build a defense up the spine, the interior defensive line is pretty strong. You got two really good guys up top there in Osa Digizu and Milton Williams. Linebacker is very deep, and safety, I think, is pretty deep, where at all three of those positions, you have some really good guys at the top, but if you're missing out at that top tier, you're still getting some pretty good players as you get further down. Edge, as we talked about, I think last week or whenever we were talking about Myles Garrett, I don't even remember when that trade request happened. Everything, kind of blends together. Edge is going to be that position where I think a lot of people are going to try to be looking at the top, look for that Josh Sweat. And if you miss out, it gets pretty shallow pretty quickly. And I think it's going to be kind of the same thing at wide receiver. I think every team wants to bring in T. Higgins. You have, a Chris Godwin who's going to come off an injury right below that. And then you have, Stephon Diggs and Amari Cooper. You're looking at some of these kind of older guys who have produced. You're still kind of hoping they have a little bit left in them. But after T. Higgins, it's a pretty, solid drop off between like what you can guarantee you're going to get. But that is going to be a place where I think teams definitely want to go out and get that top guy and might be kind of fighting. And I think T. Higgins, if he hits the market, doesn't stay in Cincinnati, is going to be getting a lot of money because of that.
How do you try to value Chris Godwin? And spoiler alert for folks, Dan values him a lot because he's got him third overall on this list. A guy that has always been the number 2 to Mike Evans by nature of Mike being the incumbent, like future Hall of Famer, but really was the driving point of that Tampa offense earlier this season until he has that really nasty injury. So between the injury and like kind of not knowing where that is, what kind of dollars do you think Godwin gets? And do you think that Tampa would be willing to pay that to even let him onto the market in the first place?
Yeah, I think Tampa is going to be tough just because of, who they do have currently paid and some of the cap constrictions that they have a little bit with, that Baker Mayfield deal. They can, restructure that a little bit, but the way they did that 3-year deal, his cap hit is going to jump from like $9 million that it was in 2024 to about, 39, I think, in 2025. So you have that big leap on that 3-year deal. You still have Mike Evans under contract. So there are a lot of things that are going. I think, Godwin's going to be, in that, low tier, and especially with how big the wide receiver market has jumped over the past couple of years, where you're looking at guys in that range easily over, $20 million. You're looking at a Jalen Waddle who's averaging, 28.25, Tyreek Hill at, over 30 years old is getting 30. So he's going to be at least, somewhere in that, 25 to, $30 million deal average per year range, and maybe even more a little bit because he is on the open market and there are going to be multiple teams going for him. And I think what kind of we've seen with these deals that have been at the top of the market now, pretty much all of them are extensions. So we haven't really seen a top tier free agent hit that. Like Calvin Ridley was the highest, and he got 23. And Chris Godwin right now, coming off the injury, is a better receiver than. Or Chris Godwin, coming off the injury, is a better receiver than Calvin Ridley was at this point last year when he signed, 4 years, $92 million. So Godwin's going to definitely surpass that, especially with it a year later and the cap still going up.
Dan Pizzuto, 33rd Team. His top 100 is out now at the 33rdteam.com. So last year, it was very clear there were certain guys that Washington was targeting, and they had a laser focus on, obviously, Bobby, and Zach was even a pre-free agency signing. So they had those two vets. But guys like Frankie Louvu, where they're like, this is the kind of player that we want. When you think of what currently makes a Washington Commander and you kind of go down your list, was there anybody that as you're making and stacking that 100 that you're like, that guy is a great fit in Washington?
I think we kind of talked about it a little bit last week or 2 weeks ago, where I think Ernest Jones is a really fun fit as a potential Bobby Wagner replacement at linebacker. And I think adding his ability to play the run in coverage, and you put a guy next to Frankie Louvu who makes the job of that guy playing next to him a lot easier too, because of just how aggressive he is playing downhill and just kind of with the range all over the place. I think that would be a very fun fit for this defense in free agency. Other than that, it's kind of tough to see because a lot of, the other places like, there's a bunch of safeties that I kind of, thought could help, like a Talanoa Hufanga. I think could be a very fun fit playing that kind of box safety type of role, but they have a lot of versatility to play there too. So I think like there are players like that who I think would kind of seamlessly fit into what Washington's doing on defense. And that's kind of where you think about some of these guys coming into Washington fitting this defense, just because, they had so many 1-year deals there. So you do also have to plug some of those holes. So I think if you get like one of those top tier linebackers or safeties, that could go a long way in helping out this Washington defense.
Real quick on that front, Jeremy Chin, you have down, I think it's 75th. I've been scrolling up and down your article, so we're just going to somewhere in that's I think maybe it was 73. But you have him in that range. Where, like, how deep in the safety class is he? And do you think that Washington can get him? I don't want to say cheap, but like if they sign him on a multi-year deal, how much are they saving on a guy like Chin versus going after the higher end in Tafunga?
There's probably going to be a bit of a difference there. I have Jeremy Chin right now as, safety 8, it looks like. But again, with safety, it is it's a deep class where I think you're not going to go wrong with a lot of places. Like I have Justin Reed right now at safety 5. And he's really good and still really young as he's going into his third contract, coming over from Houston, going to Kansas City on a pretty decent deal, and then he's going to be hitting free agency again. And I think he's still only 28 or 29. So you have a lot of guys that I think in some ways will suppress the market a little bit, because we still haven't seen that safety explosion that I still think kind of should be coming in the same way that tight end happened. I think we've gotten some of the top of the market with like an Antoine Winfield Jr. when he got paid, and Derwin James. But other than that, we haven't completely seen this market really hit. So I think anywhere you go with safety, even if you are sitting at the top of the market, I still think you're getting a relative deal based on how much of an impact they have in the modern way defenses are played to, especially in, a Dan Quinn defense that's going to be very nickel heavy. But sometimes we'll use that, third safety to come down, play in the box a little bit. You want versatility there. So I think wherever you go on this, safety market, even if you're paying top of the market at the position, I think you're going to be getting a pretty good deal based on what they are going to bring to the defense.
So one of the guys that I've got circled for Washington to keep an eye on, and I know this might sound absurd at first, is Osa Odighizuwa because of the Dan Quinn connection. But I think they'll ultimately move on from John Allen because it just makes too much sense contractually to not. And they drafted Jerzon Newton knowing that he's a probable eventual replacement for John or Duran. The way the contracts work, John is up first, and I could definitely see them with the production. He actually played well when he came back from the injury, but the way he played before and the way he's played the last couple of years, really, I could definitely see them moving on from him. So, assuming that they are in that market, what do you think about Odigizua reuniting, and where do you have him on your defensive tackle rankings?
Yeah, I have him 10th right now, and I have him as the number 1 interior defensive lineman.
So 10th overall, first defensive tackle.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I have him above Milton Williams right now, and I know a lot of people have been watching the Eagles, saw kind of what Milton Williams was able to do as a pass rusher, but Osa Odigizua has been on the field more often, and is also, I think, just as good, if not better, of a pass rusher as Milton Williams has been on the inside. And I think he brings a little more in run defense too. So, and he's only about a little under a year older than Milton Williams. So I think if the Washington does want to do that, especially with the relative lack of edge rushers on the free agent market, like if you're not going older and getting a Khalil Mack or a Josh Sweat, which Josh Sweat is going to be paid a lot of money just based on who the edges are in free agency and what he was able to do, in this playoff run. So if you want to go interior, I think Osa Odigizua is a very good fit. Obviously does have the Dan Quinn connection, like you said. I think he's just as good, if not better, of a pass rusher as Milton Williams. Brings a little more in the run defense, can stay on the field, is a guy who is able to, play more snaps and there doesn't have to be rotated out quite as much. So I would love that fit. And right now, yeah, he is my number 1 interior defensive lineman.
Quarterback market. Darnold is the one that I think is super interesting. Obviously, Rodgers looks like he'll be on the market as well. But how do you think teams value Sam Darnold? And I mean, obviously, there's the question of teams, including Minnesota. Do they bring him back for one more year to make sure that McCarthy is ready, or do they just roll with the guy they drafted in the top 15 last year? But Darnold getting outside the Kevin O'Connell bubble, what kind of value do you think teams are putting on him?
I mean, he's going to be valued highly just because, and I went through, had an article go up today about kind of looking at the quarterback landscape for every team. And there's just a chunk of teams right now who they don't know who their starter is going to be going into next season, or even just going into the off season. And it's not only that Darnold is easily the number 1 option, but when you have a quarterback class coming into the draft where you have maybe, 2 first round guys who are going to be coming out, and no one is like super excited about those 2 first round guys. It's not even like if it was last year and it was only 2, but it was still, Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. Like it's not a 2 in that way. And I think we probably had 5 or 6 guys last year who would have come out before the top 2 guys this year. So the fact that there are so few quarterback options, I think Sam Darnold is going to get a lot of money. I would be very hesitant to be doing that if I were a team who would be going out to pay him. I mean, I have him relatively high in the free agency rankings just because he is the number 1 quarterback, but he is not necessarily a guy I would feel good paying, especially because of those last 2 games that he had, kind of showing that it's still a little bit of the old Darnold. And I think Minnesota just had the most ideal circumstance for him throughout this season. And then it still wasn't, the best version of quarterback play that we've seen. So he's going to get a lot of attention just because there's a lot of need at that position. There are not a lot of players right now who are filling all of the holes that are at quarterback right now. Like the Giants right now do not have a quarterback on the roster. The Steelers only have Skylar Thompson on their roster. Like this is a league right now is desperate for a quarterback play, and Sam Darnold's going to be hitting free agency at the right time.
And there are not many good available, in, as you said, in the draft, in free agency. And then we'll see, does someone go crazy trying to trade for a guy like Matthew Stafford? And do the Rams just go, sorry, Matt, we're sending you to New York. We heard your brother-in-law is working there. Good luck. Last thing I want to ask you, Dan, kind of bringing the conversation full circle, because one other guy that you've mentioned a couple times, but he's a position of need for Washington, and he is an older player, is Khalil Mack. And so as we started talking about Ertz, we'll end talking about Mac. How do you value, now I don't say you value in terms of how you build your top 100 list. How do teams try to figure out the right number for a guy that they definitely don't want to give long-term money to? They need to pay enough that he picks them, but also you're kind of hedging your bets because you don't want to be the team that signs the guy who finally hits the age cliff.
Yeah, it's probably going to be one of those things where it is, either it's probably going to be like a short-term deal where you kind of either, have a lot of void years at the end where you're, stretching out some of the, guaranteed money that you're giving in there, either a 2-year deal with like 2 void years or something just to stretch it out, or you're, going a 1-year deal or a multi-year deal where there's not a lot of guaranteed money. I think there is a couple of different ways to do that. I think the raw numbers on a Khalil Mack deal, wherever he is going to sign, are probably going to look pretty big, but I think there are going to be a lot of ways for whichever team is signing him where they're going to make sure that, if he does eventually, fall off an age cliff, he's still been a very productive pass rusher when he's been on the field. But I think they are going to figure out ways where they are not going to be really, built in and closed in on paying him a lot of guaranteed money if that is something where, he isn't, if he falls off a cliff a little sooner than you would expect, signing him to a big free agent deal.
Dan Pizzuto writing about all of this and more at the 33rd Team. Dan, always appreciate your time, sir. And if we don't find an excuse to talk to you next week, I will definitely see you 2 weeks in Indianapolis.
All right. Sounds good. Appreciate it.
That's Dan Pizzuto with us here on The Hoffman Show. When we get back, Ben Standig, he wrote a piece in The Athletic asking how the Commanders can get closer to the Eagles, who, of course, just won the Super Bowl. We'll explore that thought with Ben next on the Team 980. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. 5 o'clock means it's time for Not My Beat. Don't forget 30 minutes from now. Never read the comments, but let's get to it with one of the day's top stories.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
Today, we're remixing the term top story. There's no huge news item, but one of the best stories that we read, like physical articles or digital articles, was one by our pal Ben Standig in The Athletic about what the Commanders can do to catch the Eagles. We've been talking about it a lot this week in, I think, broader terms, but Ben really got into some cool specifics, really put the thought and effort into it. So with that, we welcome Standig to the show to talk about it. Ben, what's up, my guy? How are you?
Craig, I'm doing great. Finally getting to chill out a little bit after the season, but we got more stuff coming up right around the corner.
Indeed. We were just talking with our last guest, Dan Pizzuta, about this, how like the NFC Championship game is a terrible place to go out. You don't have any kind of extended break, and you don't win the whole thing. So you're just like, oh, okay, finally caught my, never mind, there's no breath to catch. The Combine's 2 weeks away. But you, I think, did something in a very specific way that was really cool with this article in terms of, we think, oh, what do you got to do to catch the Eagles? You got to improve here, improve here. And you really looked at it from like more of a matchup standpoint in some ways. Of course, there's the talent deficits that you address, but the part that caught my eye that I thought was a really interesting part is when you talked about how the Eagles won the Super Bowl without blitzing, and that they didn't really blitz in the NFC Championship game that much either. It was one of Jaden Daniels' fewest blitzed games, and I would think that's something that a lot of other teams will look at, considering how good Jaden was against the blitz in 2024. Why was that something that you wanted to include, and what else do you think is important about that matchup against Philly, and then what other teams might be able to learn from Philly facing this Washington offense with Jaden and Cliff returning next year?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Mahomes, that was just a very un-Mahomes-like performance in the Super Bowl, and Philadelphia went to the extreme by not sending extra pressure. They were fortunate that they didn't have to because their line did such a good job, and they were able to put 7 in coverage. We always saw the stats over the years. Mahomes, what do? If you don't blitz him, he's going to tear you up. But if you do blitz him, he's even better. And then, you just recall, when Washington played Detroit, Jaden Daniels' numbers against the blitz were really, really good. And he, in general against the blitz, he's been pretty good. He's got a really, good feel for what the defenses are showing him at the line of scrimmage. He obviously can make plays with his arms and his legs, all that kind of stuff. And so it got me kind of thinking, well, wait a minute, if the Eagles just did this to that extent, and obviously they got to play Jaden Daniels twice a year, what could that look like? So that's when I kind of looked to see, where I knew that they had blitzed a ton in the comeback, in Washington's comeback win, which is abnormal for Philly, and less so in the other 2 games. And yeah, they were the 2 lowest percentage blitzes Washington faced this year. I would say that the very first game against the Eagles, probably Jaden's worst. I mean, I sort of throw out week 1, whatever you think of that. It's probably the game where you're like, he looked a little more uncomfortable. And I think he looked fine in the NFC Championship game, but at the same time, it wasn't like there wasn't superhero Jaden, and they did have the 4 turnovers and all that stuff. So and there's some other stats that kind of emphasize just how much Philly was hampering him. They also, like, in the 3 games, he threw 4 interceptions, and he had 6 in the other 20 games, or no, not 20, 17 games, including the playoffs, right? So, clearly the Eagles were getting to him more than other teams. Eagles have the best defense, but the point would be, well, do other teams look at that and say, hey, wait a minute, when you blitz Jaden Daniels less, that seemed to be one way to slow him down, and that's maybe something that Washington, between Jaden Daniels and Kingsbury, got to figure out, hey, if teams make this adjustment, what do we do?
Yeah, definitely. And Jaden will obviously continue to grow. Like, that's the thing that's hard to remember because he was so good. It's like, yeah, guess what? He's going to get better theoretically. And even if he doesn't get that much better, like, he played at a top 5 MVP kind of level for most of the season. So that would be okay with me as well. When you look at the other parts of this article, I think it's the more obvious stuff that most people know. You just got into it at a deeper depth. And starting with just nailing the draft. We know that Philadelphia has been unbelievable in the draft. So many of their key contributors are draft picks. And so before we get to what Washington does in 2025, I think it's worth double clicking on some guys from 2024. And not necessarily just like, yeah, Ben Sennett's got to play better, a guy that had some opportunities and you'd hope to grow in year two. But what do we know about the progress that was made, say, like by a guy like Dominique Hampton, who basically got a redshirt year that still might be a future starter for this team or might not? We just don't know. What about some of those under the radar guys and kind of what you heard as you checked in on them throughout the year and then ultimately kind of did your summary by year end to figure out where everybody was going into 2025?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think you're right. Dominic Hampton was essentially inactive almost every single week. Jordan McGee, their fifth-round linebacker, injuries. He was, and obviously with Bobby Wagner and Luvu there, there wasn't much room for him to play anyway. The team still likes these guys and their potential, but ultimately you can practice all you want, but until you get out of the field and really do it, it's hard to know how you're going to perform, in the moment and all that kind of deal. So I think that the jury's out to that extent. And I think that's the thing about this draft class in general. Obviously, it's an A-plus draft because of Jaden Daniels, even if they had drafted you and me in some of these rounds. That's going to win you the draft. Then, of course, Mikey Sanders still looks like a guy for sure. Now, Brandon Coleman and Johnny Newton played, but I don't know that we can sit here and definitively say too much about them based on this year. I mean, Newton, I think you got to give him a bit of a pass because he dealt with those 2 ankle injuries, and that really hampered his whole offseason. And Coleman was fine. It's just a matter of, do they think he's a left tackle or a right tackle or needs to go inside? So other than the top 2 guys, everybody else, it's like, all right, let's see. And then, you mentioned Sinnott, Luke McCaffrey, and then everybody behind them, it's even more than just let's see. It's like, okay, are they going to get more involved this year? Because they were somewhat involved this year, but not enough to say what their future is. I mean, McCaffrey, if he had a more involvement this year, we could just almost pencil him in to start because there's no other receivers on the roster except for him and Terry McLaurin. And yet I don't think any of us are going right now, boy, they've got 2 receivers now. Who's going to be their third? I think it's like they need a few more guys, and we'll see where McCaffrey fits in. So I think that's kind of how I'm looking at this whole draft class.
That makes sense. Ben Stanig with us here on the Hoffman Show. Specifically to tight end and middle linebacker, how much of the decisions on Zach Ertz and Bobby Wagner do you think are being made in a vacuum about those 2 guys and like what they meant and just going, well, look, we're not going to pay you like top market, but you guys played really well. We want to pay you your market value because we want to keep you, versus we're going to let the market kind of dictate. Like, I guess another way of asking it, Ben, that's maybe a little bit more direct is like how much games or how willing are they to play games with those 2 guys and, let them, go test the market, come back to us. We got Jordan McGee and Ben Sinnott waiting in reserve versus just like, no, those 2 guys are 2 leaders. We're not going to mess around. We need to bring them back.
I'm kind of the latter. Like, they really had good years, not just on the field, but in the locker room and that whole deal. Wagner's value. It's not even just being the captain of the defense, so to speak. Like, he's like Jaden Daniels' big brother, and I would do whatever I can to make Jaden Daniels as comfortable as possible, including bringing back some of the guys that were big for him. This is pure speculation. Like, I think Ertz, because of the Cliff Kingsbury connection, that's kind of what brought him here in the first place. I think to me, and he said he wants to play, that one seems a little bit more straightforward, in terms of playing and, money. I imagine they could figure it out. The Wagner one I think is a little more interesting because, he's a West Coast guy. He did come here because, he knew Ken Norton and Dan Quinn from his days in Seattle, and that was a part of the reason why he wanted to come here. And clearly he had a really good year, and this team looks like it's a lot of fun. But he's his own agent. He does not have an agent, so like he is really looking at this purely from the personal part of this is definitely, I would imagine, even more so than the business side. Not that he's not going to make himself the best deal he thinks he can, but he's really. His thoughts and feelings are really into it. There's nobody like sort of talking him into, hey, I know you want to go home, but these guys will give you this. If he wants to go home back West Coast, then, assuming there's an opportunity for him, he may very well do that. But I think bringing those guys back is pretty significant. By the way, for Ertz, I think part of it is like I mean Bates is a free agent, but also a blocking and I don't know what Ben Sinnott, which one he is. I think I asked, I had your guy Logan Paulson on with me, my podcast the other day. I think I even said, like, okay, well, based on what Sinnott showed you, who would he replace? And I
Yeah,
think the
and
answer
Logan went neither, probably.
kind of was sort
Yeah.
of like, yeah, he's not big enough to be Bates, but he didn't show enough as a pass catcher. So yeah, I think that's part of the rub. Is like I don't even know what that guy is. So
Right.
I kind of think they need to bring Ertz back. But you're keeping your fingers crossed he stays healthy. That was a rare thing he did this year, staying healthy for the whole season.
For sure. And the other thing with Bobby that you mentioned, like he's his own agent in the West Coast, and like, okay, well, why did he come here in the first place beyond DQ and Norton? He was wrapping up his stuff at Howard, and I believe he graduated. So I do wonder if that like very human element of like, okay, my thing that I kind of was coming to DC for, that I could now do some of these classes and things that I was doing in person, that's no longer a factor. Do I want to stay here? Now, the relationship with Jaden and the relationships he has in the building certainly could impact. And, plus you guys gave him the good guy award as the best guy in the locker room. And how could you pass up a chance to repeat at that? But it is just something that's worth mentioning. Okay, to the draft this year. We're joined by Ben Standig, Commanders beat reporter for The Athletic. Wrote a great article for their website about how the Commanders can close the gap to the Eagles. Some specifically, like we talked about with some of the game plan specific stuff against Philadelphia, but now the more generic just talent gap and where they need to close it. When you look at the 2025 draft, Ben, and what Washington needs to do to close that gap, how did you examine that through the lens of catching up to the Eagles?
Well, look, I mean, I think we know that Washington's core needs. Obviously, free agency comes first, so we'll see if they get aggressive in that realm, or even if they just sign sort of the level of players they brought in last year to help out, whether that's edge rusher or the edge defender. But Washington, terrible against the run all year, and looking at some data during the season, teams are just gashing them on the outside and before contact. So, clearly that's a spot of need. The offensive line, there is a world where I could see them bringing back everybody. They decide, hey, Andrew Wiley, we can save some decent money if we cut him off the cap, but at the same time, then we have to go get somebody else, and his cost isn't that much for a starter. But then, what is Brandon Coleman? If they think he's a left tackle, then okay, then you are kind of set. If you don't, then now you have to shuffle things around. And I guess the bottom line is, I would imagine an offensive lineman is a priority, if not just a flat out tackle. I think receiver / playmaker on offense, whether that could be at running back, needs to happen. I mean, you could possibly bring back the same receiver group, but it's a lot. It's just still very reliant on Jaden Daniels. Other than McLaurin, nobody showed themselves to be a true playmaker. So they need an upgrade there, and just more speed in general. Again, we could even go through it further than that because they've got roughly 30 free agents, so they do have a bunch of holes and depth as well. But I think those are the key spots. The one rub is for the draft. This is not to be considered a very good draft for the receiver spot, which is bizarre because it's been like receiver every year is typically the go-to spot, no matter where you pick in the draft. And this year there might be only like 3 guys going in round 1 that I'm based on what I'm seeing early on, and so that could be a problem if you're waiting for the draft for that. But otherwise, defensive line looks to be pretty deep this year, so they should be in good position to get one of those edge guys.
Yeah, I do think that the receiver position's interesting this year. Logan and I did our big draft preview this morning in terms of what does the draft look like position by position on the biggest possible picture. And you're definitely right. The top end guys. I mean, last year there were 3 guys that were the 4th, 5th, and 6th best prospects, arguably in the entire draft. And this year, you definitely do not have that. But there's some depth a little bit later. And there also are some bigger-bodied receivers in this draft, which I think is an interesting quirk that could be very appealing to Washington as they look to figure out their receiving room. The other big area, obviously, that we're looking at is the lines of scrimmage. And that's the last thing that you wrote about. And again, you should check out the full article for all of Ben's thoughts on this. Well crafted in written form in The Athletic. But the lines of scrimmage are kind of the obvious. We just talked about the offensive line. To me, the defensive line is tremendously fascinating. First, what do they do with John Allen? 2, I think that they definitely could pursue Osa Odighizuwa because he's got the Dan Quinn connection and he is tremendously fit for what they want to do defensively. There's obviously the Myles Garrett thing hanging out there. There's Josh Sweat. There's Khalil Mack. It is, and by the way, it's a stupidly deep edge class. in the draft. So there's a lot of options. Do you have any early inclinations or any strong feelings on where they could go or should go, specifically along the defensive line?
Yeah, well, and to your point of the Dan Quinn connection, right? I think DeMarcus Lawrence basically missed most of last year with a knee injury.
Yep.
He'll be back. He's an older guy, so this is more akin to bringing in Zach Ertz. But this is a guy that's been a Pro Bowler, and maybe they think, hey, we can, we know what he's about, the work ethic, and we think we can get more out of him. So that'll be maybe a more or less expensive way to go. I guess the question is going to be, the broad question is how aggressive is Adam Peters going to be this offseason in free agency, knowing that they've got Jaden Daniels on a rookie deal for another couple of years, so you can take advantage of that savings. Plus, obviously, they just went to the NFC Championship game. Do you think, does your sober assessment tell you that this is something, they can sustain this type of playoff contender level, or does he see it as more of a, well, we've got Jaden, but other pieces we still need to keep building because we still been doing this for 1 year as a group. Based on all of that, I do think that the defensive end in the draft to me feels like a logical choice because of the fact that there are a lot of different options for them. Whereas, you mentioned the defensive tackle. If Allen is gone, that could be a way to go. I haven't looked at enough of the offensive linemen in free agency, but how do they assess that? I can imagine them spending, I guess what I'm saying is spending, like, say, one or two guys, maybe a little bit more than what they did last year with free agents. But where are you doing it? It seems like defensive end is a spot where maybe you don't have to do that because of the draft. And I will just say this. I think, look, we all get it. You got to build up your offensive line. No argument there. And you got to help protect Jaden. But of the two lines, I kind of think the offensive line, if it stayed together, knowing Cosme's going to miss some games, that one feels a little more stable. The defensive line, Allen could go. Dorrance Armstrong was fine, but it wasn't really a breakout kind of a year. He had less sacks than he did the first two seasons, his last two seasons with Dallas, despite playing more. And, Deron Payne's obviously been underwhelming after his contract, and all their other defensive ends like Fowler and Farrell are free agents. So I think they really need to get a young piece there on the edge to go with Johnny Newton, hopefully, and be your core. So to me, draft defensive end and then sign your other guys makes more sense. But that's, as we know, February 13th. Let's see where we are in a few weeks.
Of course. I think that's a great point because they already, the stability along an offensive line is a game changer. So if you can keep relatively the same group together in the same scheme for the second straight year and stack more starts, and obviously we'll see how long it takes for Cosme to get back. But the improvement you would hope in year two for Brandon Coleman is going to help improve that line. So if you just do nothing but have continuity and have your third-round pick from last year, who, by the way, will be entering his 7th year, I believe it is, of organized football, get better, that's a that's not an inexcusable offensive line improvement plan. Defensively, it's a totally different story, and I'm of some mind, Ben, to just say, why not both? If you tell me they sign a guy in free agency and also spend a high pick on edge, oh God, we have two good edge rushers. And not that you necessarily want to do what you did with Young and Sweat in terms of needing to pay them both at the same time. But if you do one free agent and one, and whether that's Khalil Mack super short term or Josh Sweat, 2-3 years down the line, and one young guy, there are worse things you can have than a bunch of really good guys to get after the passer, especially in the NFC, especially when you're looking at trying to penetrate that Eagles offensive line, which is as good as any in football, and knowing Detroit's out there and San Francisco and some of the other great lines, and not to mention what that can do for you against the run.
No, I agree. And look, as I said, I think Armstrong was fine last year. Maybe he is a guy that's better off. But in Dallas, he was largely, A, he had Micah Parsons to play off of, but B, he wasn't really a down-in, down-out starter. Maybe there is a world where you get more less is more, play him a little bit less and maybe get the same or equal production. And then also, like you said, if it is a vet like a Khalil Mack, that's probably not going to be more than 2 years. So if you do still draft a guy in the first round, you can definitely play him, a bunch of snaps now and then get him ready for the future. And that's part of what the Eagles have been doing because they've been drafting so well. They constantly have a surplus at all these positions, so they always seem to have somebody ready to step in. So, yeah, I will never object to a team drafting multiple defensive linemen in particular, but offensive as well. You have backup, that's fine. Those groups are just way too important. But it's going to be interesting to see how they spend their money. By the way, I think the running back class to me is really interesting with Washington.
Yeah.
Because you can keep Robinson and Eckler, but some of these there may be a cube town that gives you more speed, and I think they're going to need that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, both guys are entering the final years of their deals. Eckler's taking of a 2-year deal, and Brian is on the last year of his rookie contract. And this running back class is stacked. There's a couple of guys at the top, obviously Ashton Genty, the headliner, but there's also a ton of dudes in the third round of, and you want a power back, you want a receiving back, it's there. So I think it's a great call as well. Ben Stanek writing about all of it and more in The Athletic. Ben, thank you so much for your time on the radio, sir. And we'll either talk to you next week or I'll see you in 2 weeks in Indy.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate it.
That is Ben Stanek with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, a very important for Anthony, he doesn't know this yet, TikTok update. Very, very important TikTok update. And never read the comments. It's the Hoffman Show, brought to you by the Maryland Vehicle Prevention Council. Maryland drivers, did you know a vehicle is stolen every 16 minutes in the state of Maryland? The key to preventing theft is in your hands. Lock your car, take your key, use an anti-theft device. Learn more about vehicle theft prevention at mdauthotheft.org. All right, it is time, 5:30 on a Thursday for Never Read the Comments, and boy, am I excited.
We tried to warn them. They didn't listen.
Yeah!
Every week, the Hoffman Show goes into the belly of the beast.
We read those comments, baby.
Never read the comments.
All right, so how this works. This is a radio show that also simulcasts as a digital show on YouTube. We take the video of the show and we put it on demand, and we also cut it up into shorts, reels, TikToks, whichever platform you want to consume it on. And we put it up for you to enjoy and leave your comments on, and then we read some of the comments, and there we go. That's how it goes. And before we get into the meat of some of the big Commanders topics of the week, Anthony, there was one of our shorts that we needed to check in on because it has gone, as the kids say, viral.
I mean, if Taylor Swift is involved,
High virality.
there's a chance it goes viral.
Yeah.
And man,
So along that front, I told you yesterday, last week we played a game, did Anthony and I sprung this on him. He didn't know that it was going to happen, but it was Jalen Hurts quote or Taylor Swift lyric. And Anthony actually won the game, unfortunately for him, in the way that the short got edited. The funniest ones were the ones he got wrong, so a lot more of those wound up making it. And I told you yesterday it was starting to pop off a little bit on TikTok. Well, today I looked on Instagram because I got a little notification a couple minutes ago, and it was like, your reel has 10,000 plays on Instagram. So on Instagram, Anthony, at Hoffman.sports, that reel has over 13,000 plays.
oh my God.
So I was like, let me go check it on TikTok. And actually, let me double check this real quick. Because I sent this at a screenshot with the number of views on it at 4:58 p.m. to Rachel. And it had 220,000.5 views. 220,000 views, Anthony.
Wow.
I went back to TikTok right now. It's already got, in another 37 minutes, another 5,000 views. So it's up to 225,000. It is currently, as we are speaking, Anthony, going viral.
I mean, that's good, I guess.
Let's check in with the comments.
Oh my gosh.
Of course, this has gone viral amongst Swifties because apparently, Anthony, unbeknownst to me, because I am not a Swiftie, we were playing a game that many others have played versions of. Apparently, the is this a blank or a Taylor Swift lyric genre is a whole genre that we have tapped into. I think we should play again at some point.
Oh,
apparently,
right.
it's an easy way to go viral on TikTok.
Yep.
So Emily says, Gold Rush mentioned. I've been summoned.
Wow.
Apparently, that's a deep cut, I guess.
Yeah.
And then there's lots of other Swifties that are like, yes, twin. We have people like Sarah who said, I got 100% only because I knew that wasn't Taylor Swift lyrics.
Oh.
So you had some people who knew the Swift lyrics and were like, that's not a Taylor lyric.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts quote. And then these are my favorites. 4 out of 5, and I'm a Swiftie. What? 5 out of 5. Swiftie here, 5 out of 5. I did 3 out of 5. So people, Anthony, were playing along with you.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
There's also complaints. Nothing from the alchemy.
Oh my God.
This wasn't even the whole segment. I need to figure out how to put the YouTube link here. Like, here's the whole segment.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything from the alchemy in the whole segment, but clearly not in the ones that we picked for the short.
Yeah. I mean, there were only 3 Taylor Swift lyrics, weren't there?
I think so. And the ones I love that number 5 got me. Taylor uses the word scars a lot.
That one was tough.
That one was tough. I also felt like I really convincingly delivered that like it was a song lyric.
Yeah, that one.
I feel like I got you good on that one.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
We're viral.
225,000 views. Let me refresh again. 220. Well, almost at 226,000 views and counting.
Nice.
Yeah.
We'll be at 1 million soon.
Just 220,000 more for my reel. I'm talking tight ends with Chris Russell to catch it on the old TikTok. If you want to follow me on TikTok, you can. It's Craig_Hoffman. Yes, I did have to double check my own TikTok handle. Just search my name. I'll be there. All right, let's get into the YouTube comments on the thing. We're typically not a Taylor Swift lyric show. Just sometimes it happens, Let's get into it on some of the big topics of the week in Command Land. And not surprisingly, Mark from Largo's call got a lot of comments yesterday. First of all, just comment on the call itself, because Mark from Largo called and was yelling literally at me about DK Metcalf and that the Commanders should trade for him. And he got so mad he just hung up at the end. Just straight up hung up the phone. And Kennyman DMV 202 says, left you on red, Craig. You got to get him back on the show. He's hilarious and truly is mad. Mark was mad.
You want to know the funny thing though, Craig?
What's that?
He called today.
Of course he did.
You didn't see it, but he called to get to it.
Of course he did. Of course he did.
He wanted to finish the conversation.
Then he shouldn't have hung up the phone yesterday. That's how conversations work in the real world. At Jason Marr 8, I thought actually had a really good take on DK. He goes, DK is a top 30-ish wide receiver. Got to give the guy some respect. I agree he's not what we need. Talking about Commanders, obviously. And he's been inconsistent. But he's a super talented dude who could maybe be unlocked in our offense. I would take him on the right deal over some guys in free agency like Debo, although Debo's trade candidate, or a lot of the other mediocre options out there. We definitely need a dude to pair with Terry if we want to stay at this level of success given our schedule next season. That being said, I agree he's probably not a Commander-type guy, and I have confidence ownership will do the right thing. This is, to me, the correct take on DK. My dismissiveness of him in Washington is not me saying he's not a good player. He's a very, very good wide receiver. Is he a top 10 receiver? I don't think so. Top 15, maybe. Top 20, probably. Top 30, definitely. I don't have my wide receiver list. Oh, let me just pull up here on my tablet. No, I don't have my top 30 wide receiver list. And it also depends on fit and what you're looking for. Like, he's certainly in a bucket that's somewhere below elite, somewhere probably below the next group. Like, there's Jamar, JJ, AJ Brown. Maybe those three are at the very top all by themselves. And there's
CD.
CD. Sure, he can go in there too. And then there's the next group of like Terry and all those dudes that kind of go in that list. And I think at the top of the next bucket, however deep that bucket is probably DK Metcalf. And if you want to argue that DK belongs somewhere in the same bucket as Terry, I'll take Terry 10 out of 10 times, but sure, fine, whatever. But for what it's going to cost in draft capital and giving the guy a new contract, and he's been inconsistent as a person, and as a player, like I'm just not interested, and that's why I'm dismissive. Because why have the conversation if the answer is very clearly no? Jay Gasaway 5971, because Mark was screaming about how they needed someone to scare a defense, as if the guy who is literally nicknamed Scary Terry doesn't do that. DK is not scaring any defense unless we are talking about fighting.
He's had his fair share.
He has. And I think that's what gets people messed up. They're like, oh, he's 6'4", he fights a lot, he's tough, he's big. And I'm like, no, he's 6'4", he fights a lot, and he plays like he's 5'11". He's really fast. And he can run past people. But different deal. The other big conversation piece of the week was We on Take Command went through all the position groups and talked about like which are positions of need. And really the question, it was in a mailbag, was like what positions are set for Washington in 2025? And it was a really interesting conversation because really the answer was outside of quarterback, where like QB1 specifically and wide receiver 1 specifically. And I think we wound up including center in there, where it's like, okay, Tyler Biadasz, we are 100% good there. Maybe, like, could you upgrade? Are there better centers? Yes, but I don't know if any are available, nor is it anything remotely worth considering going to try to acquire. Outside of that, you kind of look at every single position, and you're like, I don't know, I think we could upgrade there. Not that you're going to do that for all of them, but that becomes the fun conversation of team building and what opportunities present themselves this offseason. So part of this discussion was obviously the Commanders being at 29 in the draft. And Jay, two Ys, Jay 24/7 says, I kind of disagree with Logan. I feel like in the past few years, some of the best players in the draft have been chosen late in the first round. A lot of times the later picks in the first round turn out to be better than the top 10 picks. A lot of those players that drop due to some type of quote-unquote character issues or bad media narratives end up being some of the most productive players that have something to prove and play with a chip on their shoulder. And I think that this is probably something we could spend an entire 3-hour show on, Anthony. And we could go through all kinds of different lists of players and whatever. Sometimes guys do fall because of character concerns, and it's worth it. I'll give you an example. A guy who was in the news yesterday for a horrifying reason. Kadarius Toney. Fell in the draft, like incredibly talented. Crazy fast, really quick, helped win the Chiefs a Super Bowl. Arrested yesterday for strangling a woman. Allegedly strangling a woman. He's had all kinds of character issues in buildings in terms of inconsistency, missing meetings. He's been released multiple times. Bad dude off the field, done horrible stuff, clearly needs like help, and I hope that he gets it. And in the meantime, he's also getting arrested, rightfully so, for I don't know whether this is like his partner or just a random person, but some kind of domestic violence or violence against women incident. Like, there's a reason Kadarius Toney fell. Micah Parsons had some very stupid stuff that happened in his college career with some hazing incidents and whatever. He fell. He's been fine in the NFL and has been one of the best players in football. So that one, he shouldn't have fallen out of the top 10. You have to understand who the person is, how much risk they are to repeat their offenses, how much of it was just being a young, dumb kid, or is this is someone that like really needs help and or is going to be incapable of acting like an adult and a professional. There's also times where guys fall because certain skill sets are more projection, and maybe if they don't go to the right place, they're not going to be great. And Lamar Jackson, I think, could have gone to a lot of organizations where they do something really dumb with him and his career never gets off the ground because they wind up benching him before he can ever develop into what he's been. He goes to Baltimore. They have the perfect plan for him. They let him bloom to his absolute potential. And that absolute potential is he might be the best player in the whole sport. But like, think about it. If he goes to some dumb organization with some hot head coach that benches him after a stupid pick or a missed throw in his rookie year and then just keeps him on the bench and wrecks his confidence, does Lamar Jackson's career ever get off the ground? And I know that feels impossible because of how inevitable he feels. And it's just like, he would have figured it out. He's such an elite competitor. You can only play if you're on the field. And so I think that some of the guys that we think about that thrive later in drafts often go to great situations and they're super talented and it works out. But if you want the absolute blue chip impact players, the best place to get them are in the top 5. And I think the history of the NFL bores that out. Even if you can get them other places, including at the 29th overall pick.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I just think it's, I don't know, man. We're just in a tough situation when it comes to, you know, the whole, I don't know. I'm lost for words.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you're rebuilding or recalibrating, being the 29th pick is it's not as easy as being the 18th pick even.
Yeah.
Here's the history of the 29th pick over the last, how far back do you want to go? Let's go back to 2012 because there's a really good player that got taken then. Like really, really good. Last year, the 29th pick was Tyler Guyton, tackle for the Cowboys. He was very hit or miss as rookie. Very miss, really. Brian Brzee, good player for the Saints, but a role player. Cole Strange to the Patriots, guard. I have no idea how he's doing, if I'm being honest. Eric Stokes, Packers defensive back, 2021. Isaiah Wilson, tackle to the Titans in 2020. LJ Collier, Seahawks defensive end in 2019. Taven Bryan, defensive tackle. He's still in the league for the Jags. David Njoku was the 29th pick. Okay, cool. Robert Kimdichie. Remember him?
Yeah. Ole Miss guy.
Yeah.
Supposed to be a dog, but
He was #1 recruit in the country and then never put it together mentally. Just a nightmare. Also part of that big Ole Miss scandal. Your boy Philip Dorsett, wide receiver out of Miami. Played a good time in the league, punt returner type. Dominique Easley went to the Patriots. Cordero Patterson in 2013. And then Harrison Smith out of Notre Dame, who's been with the Vikings.
Going.
Yeah, he's still going. Awesome player. So you can get, Nick Mangold, isn't he in the Hall of Fame? Jet Center?
I don't know if he's in the Hall. He that's fast if he's already in the Hall of Fame.
He retired a while ago, but he's a Hall of Fame kind of guy. Like, he was awesome. He's probably the best guy that I see here. He's the 29th pick in 2006.
Okay.
Nick Barnett played forever, linebacker for the Packers. Mark Colombo. There are big guys that are really, really good players. Chris Canty now hosts a morning radio show on national radio for ESPN.
Yep.
He was a 29th pick once upon a time. So there are a lot of guys that are there, but just for kicks and giggles, the 29th pick of the second round, also plenty of guys. Ennis Rakestraw was the guy last year. DJ Turner's, playing decent ball for the Bengals. Carlos Basham for the Bills, defensive end. He's a rotation player for them. Christian Fulton, Taylor Rapp, DJ Chark, guys that stick around the league. That's the thing is the draft is a crapshoot. The draft is lottery tickets, but your odds of winning are just higher if you are higher. Because if you're good at scouting, there's more players for you to pick from, and you would rather have the bigger swath of guys to pick from if you're good at actually picking the right lottery ticket. That's not really how lotteries work, but you get the point.
Yeah, I get you.
All right, continuing on in Never Read the Comments. Thanks to drafthistory.com, a website I didn't know existed until right now, but one I will probably visit a lot between now and the NFL draft. Still lots of comments on the Myles Garrett situation, Anthony.
Uh-oh, here we go.
I feel like they were a little bit better this week.
I hope.
But I thought this was an important one to read from Kevin Robinson, 8442. Because obviously we were talking initially about The Athletic, and they had this deal that included Brandon Coleman. And he goes, who's to say Brandon Coleman won't make a Pro Bowl this coming season? Anthony, if I told you that you could trade Myles Garrett you could trade Brandon Coleman, Daron Payne, and I'll just go 1 first-round pick for Myles Garrett.
Let's do it.
And Myles Garrett's going to be Myles Garrett, but Brandon Coleman's going to make a Pro Bowl in Cleveland. I'm guaranteeing you he's going to play at a Pro Bowl level in year 2. But you get Myles Garrett at what Myles Garrett was last year. Are you turning back on that trade?
Send the trade.
Same. And that's my response. And that stops you from acquiring Myles Garrett. How? Yes, getting a franchise left tackle would be great. But a Pro Bowl is different than he's an all-pro and will be for the next decade. If you tell me that Brandon Coleman's going to be an all-pro for the next decade, okay.
You got me.
We'll keep Brandon Coleman.
Yeah.
But that's probably not going to happen. Because Brandon Coleman is probably going to be do we think that Brandon Coleman's a future top 5 tackle in the NFL? I don't.
He's
I think
young.
He's
He
young.
has a
He's
chance.
athletic.
I'll say he has a chance. Everybody has a chance, though.
I think it's a lot more likely that he caps out at the 7th best tackle in the league than he is top 5.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that's fine. If he's the 7th best tackle in the league for the next decade, the Commanders had one hell of a 3rd-round pick.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that you wouldn't trade that dude for Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important distinction. As well drawn by Andrew LaCaruso, who said, simple. You got the best player on offense and Garrett the best player on defense. Let that sink in. Yeah, that's kind of the point. Is Jaden actually the best offensive player in the league? No. Is he one of the 10 best? Yeah. Is he one of the 5 best? I would argue that he was one of the best 7 best or so last year for sure. Of the 4 quarterbacks that finished ahead of him in MVP voting, Saquon, whoever else you want to throw in there, but like Jaden was right there, and he's only going to get better. And if you have that on offense driving your offense and Myles Garrett on your defense driving your defense, that sounds a lot like when the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones.
Yeah.
Like, you figure out the rest of the stuff around it, and that becomes a lot easier because of how good those dudes are. One last on this one from Sean Carey, 7095. Bro, I always love when that. Bro, no one is doubting how good he is. There is more than one way to build a championship team. Stop acting like this is the only way and screaming at us that we don't understand. It is a risky move to put all of our eggs in one basket. Sean, I don't think you seem to understand the price of eggs or how many eggs are in the basket. All your eggs in one basket. Yes, as Jaden Daniels is on the other side of the ball. Also, it's not going to cost you all of your eggs. You eventually have to spend resources to win in the NFL. You don't get it. I'm not yelling at you. I am scolding you in a very professorial or perhaps paternal tone of voice right now. Deal with that later. The point is, you're not winning the Super Bowl without someone like a Myles Garrett. You need impact players. Like, I can't imagine watching the Eagles with all of their blue chip guys in the Super Bowl and thinking, just got to get depth everywhere. Like, no, stars win you games in the playoffs when they just look like the best game plans, the best everything, and they just go, bleep that. See that guy in front of me? He's dead now. That's what you need in the playoffs. And you have to get there, and you do need depth. I'm not saying it's an all or nothing, but it's easier to replace the depth than it is to acquire the star. And I think that's the lesson of the Myles Garrett couple of weeks here of commentary is you do that because it is easier to replace Brandon Coleman than it is to find a Myles Garrett. There are more Brandon Colemans running around the planet than there are Myles Garretts. And for that reason, you don't let Brandon Coleman get in the way of trading for Myles Garrett or, whatever else that, other thing that people are putting up. All right, last but not least, the fun ones. I had a little bit of fun when I was broadcasting live from Capital One Arena the other day, heckling some fans who were wearing random jerseys to the Wizards game. And Jonathan 24500 says, must be a slow sports radio day. The fashion police are out in full force.
Wow.
I responded to that comment, Anthony, on YouTube with the only way I knew how.
Betty Craig?
Oh my God, it looks like the fun police are here too. Shut up, Jonathan.
Hey, yo.
We were having fun. Don't you police our fun. And then last but not least, going full circle here, back to things that are embarrassing on the internet for Anthony and TikTok or Instagram reel form. DMV representer. Although I got to say, DMV representer, either that's not your screen name or you spelled representer wrong. He commented on the field goal video.
Oh, man.
Of Anthony claiming that he can make a 25-yard field goal and then sending Meg McDonald and I a video of him missing a 25-yard field goal. And he said he definitely made that. And I said he definitely did not. It's very visible in the full screen video. We should have included it. Might have to do a follow-up because the way the video got cut, you couldn't see the ball miss the upright.
See, I wasn't sure if it snuck inside the left upright.
It definitely did.
Okay,
and he said, okay, I thought I was tripping or something. His confidence sold it. Sending a video of himself missing after confidently saying he's done it before is wild work.
Oh, man. No, it is crazy. One of my lower moments in life.
In life? Anthony, I'm gonna tell you this. If that is one of your lowest moments in life, you, my friend, you've lived a great life.
Thank you, Craig.
That is never read the comments. You can leave yours on YouTube at Craig Hoffman, on TikTok at Craig_Hoffman, on Instagram at Hoffman.sports, and anywhere else that you find me on the social medias. All right, when we get back, we take a look at the NFL's quarterback carousel as it continues to turn, and one of my least favorite players is out of a job. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. All right. Quarterback. Anthony. Not a position the Commanders have to worry about.
Finally,
I feel like if we had like Pitbull, like Don't Stop the Party, just
Uh-huh.
like something really celebratory, like I would just play that and we'd dance if we had like the ability to make it look like confetti was coming down. If we had actual confetti that could come down.
What are you most happy that the Commanders don't have to worry about anymore? The fact that we have a competent and nice owner, or the fact that we finally settled in on our quarterback situation?
Owner, because that will buy like a lifetime of
Okay.
better decisions.
Yeah.
Jaden, like, I don't want to say like Jaden was unscrew-upable. There's a lot of stuff about Jaden that made me think that he could overcome, in the same way that like Burrow has overcome a lot of the typical Bengals nonsense, and now he's unfortunately running into it head on. Like, imagine if 5 years from now, like they're gonna finagle over Jaden being the highest paid player, and they're messed up 3 other contracts, and like they just waste having Jaden Daniels. That's what happens when you have a bad owner. So you can luck into a quarterback that is awesome, but at the end of the day, like then they still have to get the other stuff right. You get a good owner, one, they might be better at finding that good quarterback or hiring the right people to find that good quarterback. Because I think a lot of talent evaluators would have taken Drake May, and I think Drake would have been very, very good here. Because I think Drake is very, very good. I think Jaden Daniels was very clearly the right pick, and will continue to look like that moving forward. So I think, like, the ability to get that stuff right over time, definitely happy about having the owner more than the quarterback, even if the quarterback day-to-day winds up bringing more joy. You just have to realize that that's a symptom of the owner.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I would say. Yeah, I think the ownership situation is probably the thing that I'm more happy about. Just because we did, get the quarterback situation right. We didn't have the owner button in on it. But then also the fact that, we're actually getting players that actually want to come play here. Like,
right. Like,
I think
is
from a culture
Jaden
standpoint,
is Jaden at the level that he Jadened, if you will, without Bobby and Zach and some of these guys that they definitely don't get if Josh Harris is not the owner, and thus the rest of the hierarchy is in place.
yeah, we probably don't get a Bobby Wagner here. Granted, Dan ended up coming here, but who's to say,
He would not have worked for Dan Snyder.
exactly. So I think you got to look at it from that standpoint as well. Like, the fact we got some veterans, like, but getting Bobby Wagner last year, I couldn't believe it, Craig. I was like, Bobby Wagner's coming to DC? I was so in awe. So the fact we have other, people that actually are open to joining this team, this franchise, we haven't had it in a long time. So I guess it's a domino effect, essentially, having the owner in place first and then everything else that comes after.
I mean, owners at the top of the organization.
Yeah.
And I mean that in both a literal and a figurative sense. Everything trickles down from there. Jaden obviously makes these guys look like they're the smartest people that have ever owned anything. But it starts with ownership.
Yeah.
And the ownership will last longer, assuming that whoever Josh either sells to or if his kids are smarter. I don't know what the succession plan is. Hopefully not anytime soon. I'm just saying, like, eventually, like, it lasts so much longer than a player career.
Yeah.
So it's very, very different in terms of how that goes down over time. So with that said, the Commanders are not in the quarterback pool. The Jets are, thanks to the fact that they announced today officially that they are moving on from Aaron Rodgers. And it's a shame, Anthony. It's a shame. Because the Jets and Aaron Rodgers really did deserve each other. It's two loudmouth entities that are completely self-important and self-centered who are out of touch with reality and like what else? Just are no longer good at football. Rodgers was at least good once. Like, that's the thing. Rodgers, and from like 2010 to 2020, might have been the best quarterback of the decade in terms of the height at which he played on a regular basis. Multiple-time MVP, incredible. Obviously, the playoffs, not as much. And no one would give him quarterback of the decade because Brady won how many Super Bowls in that stretch. So, obviously, Brady should get it. Manning was still top flight for the first half of that decade. But Rodgers, in terms of, like, the down-in, down-out, spectacular nature of his play, unbelievable. Tears the Achilles. Starts fighting, or before he tears the Achilles, at the end of Green Bay, he's starting to decline. He's fighting with Matt LaFleur, who wants him to modernize in terms of the offense that they're running. Goes to the Jets, finds just, again, a match made in heaven in Woody Johnson in terms of just total incompetence. And then I think my favorite part of the Aaron Rodgers failure and just how arrogant everybody in both New York from the ownership side and Rodgers himself were is the fact that he got to bring all of his friends. Like, Aaron Rodgers cannot blame anyone else for what happened in New York because he hired the offensive coordinator when things went sideways in year 2 after he got hurt. They give Robert Saleh the second year, and then the defense is actually playing really well, and the offense is terrible, and Rodgers is terrible. And what do? They fire Saleh. They had to find a way to demote / reassign Nathaniel Hackett, who they never should have hired as the OC, but that was Rodgers' buddy. They bring in not just his buddy as the offensive coordinator, which on some level, like, hey, this guy knows how I work. He's going to install the offense I want. Like, that one is more excusable than we're going to bring in all these receivers. We're going to bring in Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb, and, like, there wasn't a huge market for it. I mean, well, Devontae at least is like, he's Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like, yeah, they bring in Devontae Adams and give up draft capital and all that kind of stuff on what was clearly a lost season already because Aaron wanted to. Like, the amount of power and control Aaron Rodgers had was so absurdly unprecedented. And to watch it fail that spectacularly as someone who will happily accept the tag Aaron Rodgers hater, even though I just think it's Aaron Rodgers evaluator. Me saying that guy sucks is just, to me, a fairly factual statement versus, you're hating. To me, hating is like, it's like Skip Bayless for LeBron James.
Yeah.
Skip Bayless is like, I don't know. Michael was better. He's not actually that good. And it's like, actually, no, LeBron James is a basketball god. Yeah. Don't badmouth that man. What are you doing? Aaron Rodgers deserves what he gets. Yeah. And I find how it all went down.
Yeah, I mean,
chef's kiss beautiful.
It definitely does suck to see Aaron Rodgers go out like this, just because he was
one of my favorite. It would if he didn't turn into a terrible person.
Well, yeah, that too.
Now I don't care. I'm like, this is what you deserve.
Yeah.
Go back into the woods.
And to say he sucks, I mean, I think it's accurate, to be honest, at this stage of his career anywhere. Like, they won 5 games last year.
He's also not good.
Yeah. So they were winning games. I don't think he was necessarily helping them win games.
No.
Because they were losing. So.
No. I mean, they won as many games with Zach Wilson the year before.
Yeah. Which is embarrassing.
Yeah. Free Zach Wilson. No, I'm just kidding. That's a step too far. See that, Anthony, that would be hating.
Hey, look, all I want to say is you're going to write Zach Wilson off, and he won't write back. In a couple of years, we'll see him somewhere.
Maybe he's the next Baker Mayfield.
Or the next Geno.
Yeah. Get that guy out of New York. Next Sam Darnold. Get that guy out of New York. See what happens. He's backing up Bo Nix out in Denver.
Yeah.
At least he was. I don't know if he still will be after this year. Anyway, the point is the quarterback carousel is turning. Will anybody give Rodgers another shot? We'll take a look at the quarterback situation and who needs one around the NFL next on the Hoffman Show. But first, the latest from the world in women's sports. It's presented to you by Wawa. Chicken how you want it at Wawa with customizable roasted or crispy chicken sandwiches. It's Hoffman Show. We're on the team at 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Taking a look at the quarterback situations around the NFL and where we think that some of the quarterbacks could land. And actually, our guy Dan Pizzuta wrote about this earlier in the week. We just had him on at 4:30 to talk about his NFL Top 100 free agent list. But if you were going to take a look at the quarterback situations around the league, Dan actually did a rankings of which teams have the best and the worst plans. Tier 1 are the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bills, the Commanders.
Hallelujah.
The Bengals, good, tier 2, good quarterbacks, need help. Chargers, Packers, Texans, Eagles, Cowboys, young guys division. I love that the Commanders aren't even in this. Just like, nope, you're in tier 1. The Patriots, the Bears, the Broncos. Tier 4, Dan calls it Brock Purdy's about to get expensive. Obviously, that's
Purdy in tier 4. Dang,
dude, Purdy was awesome last year. I know the Niners weren't very good. He was not the reason.
Yeah, that's why I'm surprised he's that low.
But I guess, would you rather have Purdy paying him big money or have like Caleb or Bo or whoever on a rookie contract?
Yeah.
I'd rather just take the rookie contract.
Yeah.
Purdy was awesome. I don't know that I want to pay him Trevor Lawrence money. Speaking of tier 5, Trevor Lawrence. Tier 6, expensive veterans. Lions are in that boat. Cardinals are in that boat with Kyler, Tua and the Dolphins, Baker and the Bucks. Geno and the Seahawks, Stafford and the Rams, and then still unknown quality on rookie deals. Tier 7, he's got the Panthers with Bryce Young, J.J. McCarthy and the Vikings, Michael Penix and the Falcons, Indianapolis Colts at 25 with Anthony Richardson. Then you have Tier 8, and this is really where we're going to focus on for the next 5 minutes. The Giants, this tier is called Who is Playing Quarterback? You have the Giants, the Titans, the Steelers, the Raiders, the Jets, and then tier 9, they just keep restructuring the Saints and the Browns.
They didn't have the Vikings in there?
The Vikings were up higher. They were in the young guys tier because they have McCarthy. So it really comes down to, like, where do these teams go? And do you think that any of these are a landing spot for, say, Sam Darnold or Aaron Rodgers? Or I don't even know if there's another veteran that's on the list. But also, like, I will tell you right now, if I was a team, like, I don't know where Rodgers goes. I'll just say that. I hope he goes into retirement because I'm done with him. But assuming that he's not going to save us from himself because he's an attention whore, which of these teams would you be like, oh, yeah, Aaron Rodgers is a good fit there? The Giants, you're not doing the New York thing again. And actually, like,
stinks.
That is actually the one that I can see talking themselves into it as much as anybody else. If the Giants are scared, or if they evaluate Shador and Cam Ward and are like, these two guys are not saving our jobs, I could see Brian Daboll being like, I'm going to take a flyer on Rodgers.
I don't like it.
I hate it. I don't think it's going to work because I think Aaron's not good anymore.
Yeah.
But, like, I see the Giants talking themselves into that to try to save their jobs more than I do a lot of these other teams. And then be like, oh, we'll draft someone in the second or third round to have a future option as well. That way, they can't be like, oh, well, what's your plan now? Aaron retired after the season. But, like, I also think the oil and water of Brian Daboll and Aaron Rodgers, I want to see it.
Yeah.
Because I want to see it blow up. Because explosions can be fun.
You're in it for all the wrong reasons. I got you.
100%. But they have the third pick. I'm not sold that the top 2 picks are going to be quarterbacks. So that's interesting. The Titans, they were like, let's see if Levis is any good. Turns out he's not. He was 36th of 36 qualified quarterbacks in EPA per play, and their offense looked definitively better with Mason Rudolph at the helm. They have the first overall pick. If I was them, I'd probably trade out of it. Or take Abdul Carter and just be like, we're going to figure out something. Or Travis Hunter, and we'll figure out something at quarterback in 2025, and we're going to just build the roster and then hope that we get someone in the long run.
Yeah, I like that idea, that plan.
But I'm not bringing Aaron Rodgers into. I'm trying to build a young team and a culture and doing things the right way. I'm not bringing Aaron Rodgers into that.
Nope.
No way, no how. What about the Steelers? He's a nightmare and a circus. And the Steelers feel like they're the anti-nightmare circus team. But sometimes I feel like Tomlin gets a little cocky and is like, I can handle it. I think the owner says no.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good, just from a culture standpoint, like, I don't know. I don't think he's the right fit.
No, I agree. They're an interesting Darnold guy. Because
the Steelers?
Yeah, because I think on one hand, it makes no sense. Because, like, Darnold is a guy that takes a ton of risks, and that feels very anti-Steelers. But in some ways, it's what the Steelers need. They need more variance offensively. They need to give themselves a chance to put up some points. They would need to surround him with a bunch of stuff, but yeah. I could see Darnold in Pittsburgh and hopefully the coaching from Tomlin going well. And he's also mobile enough and attacks the right areas of the field to, I think, actually be a good Arthur Smith quarterback.
Yeah, with the talent he had last year, I mean, you would expect him to, go out there and put up those numbers, but it's hard to go out there and find, some people to surround him with and, compliment him with out there in Pittsburgh. So I think that would be the only thing that would be holding me back from him being there.
If you tell him, hey, dude, throw it up to George Pickens, Sam will be like, all right, you said throw it up there. The Raiders, honestly, the Raiders are low-key one of the better situations, I think, of this terrible list. They don't have an obvious way to go, which is obviously less than ideal. But, like, you're going to deleverage the quarterback because Pete Carroll is going to want to play that way. Chip Kelly is very quarterback-friendly. And actually, as much as he's thought of as, like, this spread out, whatever, like, he's obviously the new OC. He likes to run the ball a ton. This is not an Aaron Rodgers destination. This could be an interesting Sam Darnold destination. And I also think another sleeper name that's relevant to Washington is watch out for them to draft someone and pair him with Marcus Mariota. Because Marcus and Chip go back to Marcus winning the Heisman in Oregon. And Marcus is from the West Coast. And if he's not going to stay in D.C., he's going to want to get back to the West Coast and have a chance to start. And this might be the one place that he actually gets that. I think there's a really good chance that Marcus winds up staying here because he enjoyed it so much. And, getting to play with this group of coaches and Jaden and all that kind of stuff. But I think the double checkbox that entices him to leave, combined with the third box of money, is a chance to start on the West Coast. And Vegas is close enough to the West Coast. As he just gave, his wife just gave birth to their second child. Does he want to be back closer to his family?
I think on the Sam Darnold front, is he a guy that elevates the guys around him, or is he a guy that is a product of what's already there kind of thing?
I think he's the latter.
Yeah.
But if you're Chip and you need someone to make a couple of big throws and otherwise hand the ball off, and their O-line's got some okay pieces on it, like, again, like the thing about this group of teams is, like, there aren't good options this year unless one of these quarterbacks in the draft is way better than we realize. Like, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people that like Russell Wilson in 2012, but he ultimately was a third-round pick. Is there someone that is like that in this class? And how funny would it be if he went to Pete Carroll's team? The Jets, they're obviously not a Rodgers or a Darnold destination.
No.
I don't know what they do, bro.
Justin Fields.
I could see Justin Fields playing quarterback for Aaron Glenn.
Yeah, I don't know. I know there was a report earlier, though, about Trevor Lawrence to the Steelers. Maybe the Jets try to get in on that as well.
Of course they would try to get in on it. They're the Jets. They want to get in on everything.
Yeah.
The Saints.
I think Derek Carr's he's staying.
Well,
that's what Kellen Moore said.
Well,
anyway.
no, Kellen Moore said today he was non-committal to Derek Carr today. He's like, we'll see.
Yeah.
But he turns 34. He has an enormous cap hit. He could be traded to free up some cap space. So that's like, do the Jets go trade for Derek Carr?
Okay.
And by the way, never mind. If they hold on to him, like, are they just going to restructure again? Like, what are they going to push this money? They can't have Derek Carr there unless, maybe they do. Maybe they just say, you know what? Derek Carr's not good, but he's also not terrible. And getting better than him is going to cost us a lot of money.
Yep.
And maybe we just eat the cap hit this year, and then we move on next year. And if we're terrible again, fine. Hopefully we'll be picking at the top of a better draft next year. Like, in some ways, that should be the plan.
Yeah.
And then there's the Browns, which, by the way, Dan Pizzuta writes he does for each team, 2024 review, 2025 outlook for the quarterback situation, 2024 review. You saw. That's the entire write-up.
Wow.
Excellent.
Wow.
Deshaun Watson and his bad Achilles, $76 million cap hit for 2025.
That is brutal, man. $76 million. Oh, my God.
The good news for them is they have the number 2 overall pick. They kind of have to draft someone.
Yeah.
Or
$76 million.
they could trade Myles Garrett and kind of restart the clock and, maybe get another generational pass rusher in Abdul Carter.
You go that route, I guess.
Don't like the quarterbacks. Man, what a bad situation they're in. All right, when we get back here on the Hoffman Show, keep the NFL conversation going. Then we got real things to wrap it up. Final half hour coming at you at the team on the Team 980. Are you ready to win big and live it up in Sin City? It's the Slam Dunk in Vegas on the Team 980. Listen for your chance to win a flyaway trip to Las Vegas with 3 friends and $20,000. I'm sorry. He said what now? That's right. Listen for your chance to win a flyaway trip to Las Vegas with 3 friends and $20,000 in spending money for the first 2 rounds of the college basketball tournament. You'll stay at the Circa Resort and Casino, Las Vegas' premier sports viewing destination, and visit the biggest March Hoops party at Stadium Swim. Winning is easy. Just download the free Odyssey app, log in, and listen to the Team 980 for a chance to win the experience of a lifetime. Listen each day for an hour to earn your daily entry. This is a national contest. More details are available at odyssey.com/slamdunk. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, where if you listen live, you can win that slam dunk to Las Vegas. We're also streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, where we encourage you to listen for hours on end / watch the show, but you got to listen on the Odyssey app to win the contest. So, Anthony, one of the best parts of All-Star Weekend last year is not going to happen this year. The league has not been able to figure out how to get the Sabrina Ionescu versus Steph Curry three-point shootout rematch on. This seems like a no-brainer, not only because it was great entertainment, it created a ton of buzz, like it was kind of what the best of All-Star Weekend is, but the All-Star game is in San Francisco. It's in Steph's home arena. And you know where Sabrina Ionescu is from?
The Bay?
The Bay Area.
Yeah.
So apparently this fell apart because they couldn't find a way to raise the stakes. Like initially, it was very clear they were hoping for a 2-on-2 with Sabrina and Caitlin Clark versus Klay Thompson and Steph. Well, Caitlin and her representatives were like, we're good. The WNBA All-Star game is in Indianapolis this year. She wants her first three-point shootout to be the WNBA three-point contest in Indy. Which, respect.
Yeah.
Hey, no, I'm going to do this for my city and my league. I'm not going to lend my star power to the NBA just because you want to make a spectacle out of it. Maybe next year, but like, also Caitlin Clark is still napping. She's in hibernation. Yo, her State Farm commercial where she's like, rookie, and she pulls out the chair. Yeah. She's like, I can tell you stories. And then they close and like, you want to play games. She's like, games? And then disappears again. A+. That's like the State Farm commercials that are like that. Those are all very well done. The Ludacris one, there was the Jimmy Butler one. Like those are all really good. That's the best one.
Yeah,
very funny. Anyway, she said no, and then they were like, "Well, we got to find a way. Do we put it on Sunday? Because now they have this Stars game. Then goes on to be a part of the tournament format that they have on Sunday." And they're like, do we put it in the middle of those 4 games? Whatever. All they had to do was run back the same thing. Just Steph versus Sabrina 2, the rematch. I don't get why they feel like they had to reinvent the wheel. And I know that there is obviously no star bigger than Caitlin in the women's game, but Stewie, Fee,
Asia.
Asia in a three-point contest. I mean, she's starting to shoot threes, which is terrifying for the W. And the players that are having to deal with her there. But, like, you can find another, like, Jonquel, like, Sabrina's teammate, 6'5", shooting threes. Like, there's enough players in the W to find one that has some level of star power. Kelsey Plum. Like, find someone, Kelsey Mitchell, to make this happen if you need a 2-on-2 to get Steph and Klay. Like, I just
missed opportunities.
Missed opportunities, and it's not just about like, oh, this is a missed opportunity for women's basketball and to expose basketball fans. Like, this was the most fun part of All-Star Weekend. I'm not even trying to make some larger statement here about what your All-Star Weekend mostly sucks. This was very fun. Do the fun thing again. That's all I want. That's my rant. That is literally the extent of my rant. I'm not even trying to make a bigger point. Do the fun thing again.
Yeah, I mean, I think to the point, of the 2-on-2 being able to find somebody else to, fill in replacement, I think it would have made it go. Again, like as you said, last year everybody was tuned into Steph versus Sabrina, no matter like what it was. So them trying to, up the stakes and things of that nature, just give us what we want, to be honest. Like give the fans what they want, and that's all we wanted, to be honest. Like to be able to see the best of the WNBA versus some of the best in the NBA. Like
to make a large,
it's not that serious.
Yeah, to actually make a larger point though, what is the expansion team in the W this year?
Oh, isn't it the
Golden State Valkyrie?
Yeah.
Pair Steph up. Now, they tried to make some runs at some players in free agency, and they have really struck out. So this is, like, by far, from a star power standpoint, the biggest star on that roster is Kate Martin, Caitlin Clark's college teammate at Iowa.
Yeah.
Julie Von Loo, who played last year
With
here
us.
in D.C., she's on that roster. Kayla Thornton. Like, those are kind of the players that you're picking from, I think, in terms of, like, players who are shooting threes. There's a couple others that I honestly have not heard of. They got some international players that I'm just not familiar with, their games. Why not pick, in order to help promote the Valkyrie, even if it's Kate, just based off pure star power, have Kate and Steph take on Sabrina and Jalen Brunson. Golden State versus New York.
Yeah.
Like, that feels like a way to do it. Like, there's just so many ways.
I ain't gonna lie. I like the way you think, Greg. I like the way
He's
you
giving
think.
away free ideas.
Golden State versus New York. LA versus Indiana. Yeah, I like it. I like it.
Find a way to make it interesting.
LA. Who else got teams? LA.
Yeah, I
got
mean,
Atlanta.
they do that. Well, they kind of do this with what's it called? With the skills challenge thing, where they'll have like they used to call it like the shooting stars thing, where they have like a legend, a W player, and an NBA player.
Yeah.
But like, again, we don't need this to be multiple whatevers. Just if you want to do East Coast, West Coast, take Kelsey Plum. She's now with the Sparks. But like, find a way to promote the Valkyrie, your new WNBA team. That would be a cool way to do it. There's your idea. I solved it. Get this thing back on for the weekend.
Who was in the room with these people, man?
I don't know,
I
but
feel
I'm
like
just giving out free ideas on the radio.
I'm saying you came up with it and boom. Didn't take too long.
No.
A little back and forth,
Anthony, people should be paying us more. That's all I'm
Man.
saying. Like, out there in the world. This radio show should have a tip jar.
Nah, for real.
Here's my Venmo. Just hold that up during the show. I'm going to start doing the show with a QR code on YouTube that's just like, here's my Venmo.
And they can scan it easily, just saying.
They could. I don't think our bosses would be too happy about that.
Yeah.
All right. When we get back, real things real people said into real microphones. 980 is brought to you by the Maryland Vehicle Prevention Council. Maryland drivers, did you know a vehicle is stolen every 16 minutes in the state of Maryland? The key to preventing theft is in your hands. Lock your car, take your key, use an anti-theft device. Learn more about vehicle theft prevention at mdauthotheft.org. All right, before we get to real things, Anthony, there's stuff in the folder, yeah? You've been finding things on the internet. You're so good at your job.
Yes, there are things.
Oh, there's lots of things. Okay, well, we'll try to get to them very, very quickly. But we must first do another TikTok update.
Let me guess.
So just for context here, at about it was about 4:58 today, I looked at my TikTok page, and there is a reel that we made of Anthony trying to guess Jalen Hurts quote or Taylor Swift lyrics, and it had ballooned to 220,000 views. By the time we talked about it again in Never Read the Comments, it had gotten another 5,000 views. So at 5:30, it had 225,000 views. Anthony, how many views does that reel have right now as it is going viral on us in real time?
It is at 231.
Anthony, it is at 236,000 views.
I sold myself short, or I sold us short.
230. You're the star of that show, let's be honest. 236,000 views as the Swifties play along.
Oh, my gosh. Ridiculous, man. I guess it's a good thing, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should do it once a week.
Go viral once a week?
I mean, if it's that easy, we just got to play Taylor Swift games.
All right.
Taylor Swift versus athlete quotes. Come on.
All right. Hey, look, I'm down.
She's got a lot of songs in her canon.
She has too many there. I need to go listen to her albums.
And here's
That's
the
what I
thing,
need
with
to
all
do.
these Taylor's version songs, all the songs got twice as long.
Man.
So there's probably hidden gems in these that are not in the original.
She got a lot of Album of the Year awards, too, so.
She does. You know who else has got one now?
Queen Bee.
She does.
Finally.
You going this summer?
I have not gotten a ticket, but guess what, Craig? General admission tickets go on sale tomorrow at noon.
They do. Good thing I already got to.
I know.
Good thing.
Hey, look, you were one of the few people that were lucky enough to get it.
Dude, apparently it's been a mess. Like it's
been
We
nasty.
got lucky. And I was the one who had to do it. Normally Rachel would have probably been the one on the presale. But she was on a train, and so the pressure was on your boy. But we did it.
That's all I keep seeing. A lot of my friends keep getting this.
It's a blank. It's a white screen.
Oh.
It's not showing up on the camera, but it was a valiant effort.
Yeah. It just said something went wrong.
Oh.
Yeah.
Apparently it's been a lot better than the old Ticketmaster stuff. The SeatGeek is it the platform that's being used now?
Yep.
But it's like at least not making people wait for hours for nothing.
Yeah.
I was online for probably like 30, 40 minutes.
Good gracious.
But
Bless
we got
your
two.
heart.
We got
Bless
two,
your
and
heart,
they weren't like they're expensive. Don't get me wrong, but they were not like heinous. To get we were hoping to get 4, and for that we were gonna have to pay over $1,000 ticket, and so we
For
did
what?
not do that.
Oh, 4 tickets?
Yeah, for $1,000 per ticket, and I was like, I mean these are good seats, but I ain't made it that kind of money.
Yeah, good gracious.
All right. All that said, all that done. Tomorrow on the show, it's a Friday, so Clinton Yates will join us. We are also going to talk to Varun Shankar of the Washington Post. He has a big Alex Sarr feature coming out tomorrow that you can look for at WashingtonPost.com/sports or when they throw the newspaper at your house. And we're going to talk to Varun about Alex Sarr. So I'm excited for that. Anything else that we got locked in for sure tomorrow, Anthony?
Probably a weekend preview.
Oh, yeah. It'll be a weekend preview. Still brought to you by
Nobody, Craig.
the same people that bring you this.
Real things.
We're not gonna be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right. Podcasts are fun. Podcasts by athletes are fun. Apparently, unless you're their coach. Knicks coach Tom Thibodeau is apparently tired of not just being asked about Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart's podcast. He's tired of their podcast, period.
I was like, hello?
Yo.
I'm just letting you know, the camera's on and we're recording.
We're doing a podcast.
Oh, God. Oh, God. Please, no.
Oh, God, please. So, like you said during practice today, go do a podcast, right? Because me and Josh, I guess, were BSing. So here we are.
Yeah, finally listening.
Yeah,
Finally listening.
during our real job.
Yeah, well, give me a call when you guys are done messing around over there.
You don't want to say anything to the people?
No. Go Knicks, that's it. Stay out of trouble.
That is actually hilarious.
That is gold.
Yeah.
That is good.
Tom Thibodeau, man.
I just imagine him being like, "Oh, these idiots." How many line drills did they have to run today? After doing that to him.
Well, it was after practice, I think.
Yeah, but okay. Well, the next practice, how many times are they? How many laps are they gonna have to run?
Probably,
The correct answer, Anthony, is the limit does not exist. Yeah. In other NBA news, the other night, Austin Reeves learned a new word from my old friend Dave McMenamin.
Austin, just as like a basketball aficionado, was there a part of
what?
Helping your vocab tonight? Aficionado.
What's that?
A fan.
Big fan.
Someone who appreciates the game of basketball,
I didn't
right?
know that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He's a basketball aficionado, Anthony. Apparently not a vocabulary aficionado.
No, he is not. Good gracious.
That was, I just love the, what? It's good stuff. All right, that's our show for today, Radio Aficionados. We'll be back tomorrow at 4 for another edition of the Hoffman Show. BetMGM tonight is coming up.